Hi there guys, welcome to my next video, and here we're going to have a look at the equipment that we can mount down here. Okay, so there's various different things you can put on your tanks and they help them perform better, well hopefully better anyway. You've got 3 equipment slots, but you've got a lot of equipment to choose from. Okay, so here's a small list of it, okay, well a large list of it. There's some things on here slightly different from tank to tank, and we'll go through them in turn. First of all though, when you're playing the game at first and you're going through the beginner's missions, you will get automatically a camouflage net. Okay, and the camouflage net reduces your detection chance. So essentially when you're stationary and you've been stationary for more than about 5 or 6 seconds, you'll hear a click now and you'll see a little square come around the camouflage net, which I'll show you what it looks like in a minute in a game. And that means that the camouflage net bonus is come on and your concealment of your vehicle will be better, so it'll be harder for enemies to spot you, especially if you're hiding in or behind the bush. So that's useful. It's very nice that you get that. I would recommend for your second thing that you buy is you buy binocular telescopes when you finally get enough money. Okay, they're 500,000 normally, although 250,000 at the moment when they're on a sale, which is quite useful. And that increases your view range by 25%, and that can be useful. And the reason why I advise a camouflage net and binocular telescopes as your first kind of equipment purchases is because you can change them and move them between your tanks. You don't have to keep them in the one tank. Okay, they are examples of demountable equipment. So I can take them off if I want to. So for example, this artillery, I can remove that camouflage net and I can put it on my Matilda, for example, should I want to. The reason why I'd go for those two is because although they suit some tanks more than others, they're going to be generically useful and they don't cost so much. And when you're playing the lower tiers, it's useful to be able to take your equipment off and move it to your next tank when you move on. When you get up to the higher tiers, things like the Caernarvon up here, then yeah, it's becoming more useful to have permanently mounted equipment. Now let's have a look at a few other things. So we start up at the toolbox. Up at the top, does what it says on the tin, 25% to repair speed. So if you get tracked, your tracks will repair 25% quicker. Obviously very useful. More useful for things like medium tanks and heavy tanks when you're going to be up and brawling and you might get hit by arty and so on. Can also be useful on light tanks, because then if you get hit on the tracks then you want to be getting out there as quick as possible. But generally in light tanks you're going to use your repair kit, and if you've been tracked and use your repair kit and then get tracked again, you're probably going to die pretty quick. So maybe it's not the best place on a light tank. Again, you could say it could be useful on a tank destroyer because you don't have a turret, so you need to use your tracks to traverse, and without your tracks you're going to be dead. But again, if you're getting tracked in a tank destroyer and there's an enemy close by, a lot of the time you're not going to be able to turn as fast as they're going around you, and you're going to be dead anyway. Next one we have down here is we have enhanced leaf springs. Okay, you get slightly different variations on this, and that gives you an increase to your suspension load and your durability, so you're less likely to get tracked and you're less likely to take damage if you fall off a cliff. This can be useful if you're mounting equipment on your tank, things like your camouflage net and your binoculars and so on, which actually weigh something. Okay, these all weigh something. So it says there, camouflage net 100 kilograms, binocular telescope 50 kilograms, the shell rammer 300 kilograms. So it can increase your load limit and you can load extra equipment on. Or you could maybe put on a bigger gun without having researched the tracks already. So it could be quite useful for that. But I think 500,000 maybe a little bit expensive. The enhanced gun lane drive is useful. Okay, that's going to increase or decrease your aiming time. It's going to make your aiming time faster by 10%, which can be useful especially on things that have got long aiming times like artillery, like some TDs as well. That will help out. I wouldn't mount it on light tanks, I wouldn't mount it on anything lower tier, because you're going to be not hanging around too much, and it's going to cost you gold to demount this, or you're only going to get part of your money back when you sell it. Okay, it says there, complex equipment can only be demounted and used again with gold, otherwise it will be destroyed. Coated optics. This will increase your view range at all times, plus 10%. You'll notice at the binocular telescope, 25%, but only when you're stationary. So this is useful for fast moving light tanks, things like the AMX ELC BIS. Okay, here, very fast tank, and you can see I've got it mounted. It's going to increase my view range all the time, even when I'm sitting still. Now, the coated optics and the telescope don't work together, as far as I'm aware. I think that's correct, or it was last thing I knew, only one of them. But I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you've got coated optics and a binocular and you're running around, your coated optics come into play, and when you sit still, your 25% binocular telescopes come into play. So that's working on your base view range. So if I have a look at my view range on this tank, my view range is 396. Okay, so my view range is 396. With the addition of the crew being on 100% and this coated optics, my view range has gone up to 588. However, if I had the binocular telescope on, it would increase this 396 by the 25% when I was stationary, and when I was moving, only by the 10% for the coated optics. So they don't add on top of each other. Next up, the shell rammers. Now you get different types of shell rammers for different tanks. For example, artillery, you'll get artillery, and this one's got a medium caliber artillery shell rammer. If I have a look at the T-34, I'll have a large caliber tank gun rammer, and if I pick something that's smaller and also got a rammer, do I have one? I don't think so, actually. Okay, so you'll get different rammers, so I wouldn't advise them again unless you've got a tank that's got a long reload, like artillery, like a heavy tank, like some TDs. Wet ammo rack I've never really used. Sometimes I don't find getting ammo racked all that common. So it gives you an extra 50% to your ammo rack durability, so you're less likely to explode or have your ammo rack damaged. But I don't think that's really worth the investment. Some people may do, but I don't personally. Next up we get spall liner. Now this means that you'll take less damage from high explosive and to ramming as well. Okay. Now, this can be useful if you've got a big heavy tank, or a tank with thick armour, like the Matilda. Okay, the Matilda, I've got a rammer on, a spall liner on here, a medium one, because it's got relatively good armour, and that'll just buff that out a little bit. Other things, like the Jagdtiger, that's a magnet for artillery, so having the extra 10% on my frontal armour gives me an extra 25 mils of frontal armour against high explosive, can be quite useful. Okay, but again, it's maybe not all that great. Then we'll come on to some of the things that you don't get so commonly. Okay, you fill your tanks with CO2, so you're less likely to have a fire if your fuel tanks are hit. Not worth it. Don't bother. Better off putting a fire extinguisher down in one of these. The torsion bar, that's the same thing as the suspension improvement from earlier on. Okay, and if we have a look at other tanks, it's like some of the heavier tanks, like on the Carnarvon, you can get a vertical stabilizer. It can just about afford. Now this improves your accuracy while you're on the move. Okay, so it gives you 20% accuracy, and that is very useful. That's probably more useful than the enhanced gun lane drive when you move for your aiming. So it makes your aiming circle smaller, so you're more likely to hit your targets, especially when you're moving. And for certain tanks like the Carnarvon, it can be quite useful to be able to fire on the move. Other things that you might also see, as you can see sometimes on some of the German tanks, on like the medium tanks, I think I've got them here, you get the additional grousers, which basically mean you can move faster, accelerate better, and turn quicker on soft ground. That can be quite useful if you've got a light tank or a medium tank with good mobility. Okay, well, that's a little quick introduction to the enhancements, but there's one last one to cover, and that's the ventilation class, and that's very useful on tanks that are enclosed, which are most tanks. So a tank that isn't open on the top, like the Dicamax there, you can see is open on the top, so we can't get improved vents, but down here we could get improved vents. So this gives plus 5% to all crew skills, and you'll notice that they've got class 2, class 1, class 3. That's just about the size of your tank. So if I have a look at the Jagdpanther, that'll probably be the class 2 again. Yep, there we go, class 2. But if I look at the Jagdtig, it's class 3. Okay, and they cost more money, but they do the same thing based on the size of your tank. They can be very useful, but again, I'd only get those on tanks you either intend to keep or that you are going to have for a long time and could potentially be difficult. Alright, thank you for watching. As always, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. In the next videos coming up soon, I'm going to definitely have a look at some of the maps. I'm going to have a look at some of the tier 1 and tier 2 tanks, and maybe even I'll do a little review of the tier 2 tanks and where I particularly think are good tanks and where I have fun, and which tanks I particularly hated at tier 2. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope you're having a good time and enjoy World of Tanks. Bye bye.